I'm Elex Michaelson. This week, the issue is vaccinating California. Major changes in the strategy of who gets vaccinated and when, and what that means for businesses reopening. The man behind those decisions is California's Secretary of Health and Human Services, Dr. Mark Ghaly. He's with us for an exclusive interview. Plus, the issue is reforming the police.
Ayes are 220, the nays are 212. The bill is passed.
This week, the House passing the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. Negotiations now underway with the Senate. The author of that bill, California Congresswoman Karen Bass, is here to discuss that, COVID relief, and more. Plus, the issue is vaccinations.
There's nothing that anyone cares more about than getting a vaccine.
The city of Long Beach is way ahead of the entire state when it comes to getting shots into people's arms. Long Beach Mayor Robert Garcia shows us why, as the issue is starts right now.
Broadcasting across California, California's only statewide political show. You're watching The Issue Is.
And welcome to The Issue Is. I'm Elex Michaelson. This week, a major change in California's public health strategy, a plan to reopen sports stadiums, concerts, amusement parks, all prompted by a plan to get more vaccines to underserved communities. Let's start there. That new plan provides 40% of doses for California's poorest neighborhoods, meaning about 400 zip codes where 8 million people live. When those folks are vaccinated in greater numbers, it will make it easier to reopen businesses like indoor restaurants, movie theaters, and gyms. With us now, one of the key architects of that strategy, Dr. Mark Ghaly, is Governor Newsom, Secretary of Health and Human Services. His background is in public health and as a pediatrician. He's also the father of 4 kids. Dr. Ghaly, welcome to The Issue Is for the very first time. Great to have you.
Great. Thanks for having me, Alex.
All right, so let's start with the new vaccine strategy. This is a big deal for the state. How exactly is this going to work, and why now? Why is this so needed now?
Look, the communities that have burdened the greatest proportion of COVID-19 hospitalizations and deaths are those in these zip codes that we're targeting. So making sure that we more effectively get vaccine into the arms of those who live in these communities is a key strategy. And it's not just to protect those communities, but we know that transmission in certain parts of the state, those communities in particular, we talk about them as the lower quartile healthy places index communities, largely Central Valley, a lot in Southern California, LA region. When we can control transmission in communities and areas like those, we know that the whole state is going to be better off. So focusing the vaccine effort very, very much in those communities is a key strategy to get through this altogether. And I'll just remind you one last fact. We're seeing it in the data. We've said the data is going to guide us. What we're seeing now is this roughly 25% of our eligible Californians in the focus zip codes have only received 17% of the vaccine. Those in the more affluent areas of the state, over 30% of the vaccine. That's an inequity that can't be tolerated and that we're working hard to fix.
Let's talk now about the other big news of the week, a plan to reopen stadiums and concert venues outdoors. This is all outdoors, and this all begins April 1st. Let's put some of the information up on the screen about some of the numbers here. Stadium events can reopen at 20% capacity if the county's in the red tier, 33% capacity in the orange tier, 67% capacity in the yellow tier. This is exciting for a lot of folks, but walk us through this. What is this experience going to be like when you go to a sporting event? Because it's not going to be like what we saw before.
Yeah, I see this as an opportunity for us to basically wrap a bubble around a group of fans from the same household that go and get an outdoor experience of something that so many people have missed. They'll sit in seats pretty far away from others. They'll be asked to keep their mask on. They'll be helped in and out of the stadium. Concessions will be very different than normal. Not get out of your seat whenever you want to go up to the concourse and buy, garlic fries or a soft drink. There'll be a lot of controls on how fans come in and out. And I think still many people will get the joy of something they've missed for quite some time.
And, of course, get to go cheer on the World Series champion Dodgers in person. Another big announcement concerns outdoor theme parks. Starting April 1st, they can reopen. Here's some of the numbers there. 15% capacity in the red tier, 25% capacity in the orange tier, 35% capacity in the yellow tier. They're limited to California residents only buying online tickets. And this experience also going to be very different than it was a year ago.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see slightly lower occupancy capacity limits than the ballparks. This is because we know it's a little harder to keep people in a fixed seat or a single spot throughout the entire experience, but still focused on small groups, moving through the park, having short experiences on rides, keeping almost everything outdoors. Even in the red tier, some of the indoor dining experiences are going to be closed. So really this distance between people and still focusing on outdoors and keeping your mask on. And through that, I mean, what we've seen and the science tells us is that can be done safely.
You know, there are folks that are watching this, though, that are going to say, look, Disney World has been open for a long time. Disney parks have been open all around the world except for in California. The Dodgers played in the World Series in Texas. There were fans in the stands then. Thinking back, do you think maybe we waited too long on this one?
You know, I don't think so. We saw the winter surge was really, really hard on California. We saw hospitals full, and anything that might have added to that or made it a little worse, I think, cost lives. Our focus has always been on saving lives. I think that we're getting to the place where now the evidence that things can be done safer outdoors, the advent of vaccines, 3 high-quality vaccines that are getting out into the communities, and really these downward trends in the numbers put us in a place where we can begin to do this.
You know, there's some Laker fans watching this, some Warrior fans watching this right now. They want to go back inside to watch a basketball game or other indoor events. What's the timetable like for that?
We're hard at work already. Over the next few weeks, we expect to be able to share that with Californians and anticipate when activities like that will come. But again, higher risk, still more concerning. There will be some delay compared to the April 1st for these outdoor activities that we talked about today.
Another big story of the week is what happened with schools. The governor at the end of the week signing a $6.6 billion plan to try to incentivize school districts to reopen. You're one of the top medical experts in the entire state. What do you say to parents? What do you say to teachers? Is it safe right now to go back into in-person school?
The overwhelming evidence shows with the protections that California not only has put in place, but insists on being in place, that we won't let schools operate without them, that schools can be operated in a very safe way. And I would say not only can they open, but they should open.
But you know well that there are teachers unions up and down the state that say we will not go back unless all of our teachers get their second dose of vaccine. Timetable wise, that could be a month and a half out. What do you say to them?
Well, I mean, we're working to make sure that they have all of the questions they've answered about what the vaccine does and doesn't do, why there's a chance to come back to in-person education in a safe, low-risk way with the current mitigating strategies even before that second dose of the vaccine is given. And we believe we're going to make some inroads. It's not going to be perfect, but, you know, little by little, and we've seen it throughout this pandemic, the more we show that things can be done safer and lower risk, the more likely people are going to do that.
A final sort of big picture question. You know that there's some Californians that are frustrated by the state's response. The governor now facing a recall largely because of this. You work with him closer than just about anybody. And I'm wondering if you can take us behind the scenes for a bit and just talk to us about any perhaps misconceptions you think that are out there about him, what he's like, and what he's done on this.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, he's a leader that is going to follow the science and the evidence and work hard to make sure that we implement that in a state of 40 million people in a thoughtful way. And I think we enter today with that in mind, as we have on almost every day of this pandemic response, and we'll keep carrying that forward.
And just lastly, I know there's been a lot of sort of tough news that you've had to deliver over the last year. It does seem like, although we got to keep wearing the masks and keep doing our part, things are significantly getting better.
I mean, they certainly are. The advent of vaccines, the improvement in our data and numbers, and just what we've learned, I think, allows us to do things differently. And I certainly appreciate all your viewers and all Californians' input and help to get us here.
Well, Dr. Mark Ghaly, thank you so much for taking out some time on a very, very busy time for you and the state leadership, and great to have you here on The Issue Is.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Up next, Congresswoman Karen Bass is with us to talk about reforming the police, passing COVID relief, and more on the week that her signature legislation passed in the House. But first, a reminder to log on to our website for more content, including podcasts. Just go to theissueisshow.com. This week, Congress has been busy on some of the biggest issues of our time, one of them being COVID-19 and a $1.9 trillion relief plan. Another issue, policing and race, with the House passing the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, authored by my guest this week. Congresswoman Karen Bass is a Democrat from Los Angeles and the past chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. Congresswoman, welcome back to The Issue Is.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Let's start with the biggest issue, which is, of course, COVID. What does that relief actually mean for the average Californian watching this right now?
Well, for the average Californian making under $75,000 a year, you will be receiving a check for $1,400. For families under a certain income level, you can have a child tax credit, which is actually will be checks that will be coming to you on a monthly basis. So if you think about how at the end of the year you get a tax refund, instead of waiting till the end of the year, it will be issued out on a monthly basis in terms of checks. The unemployment insurance will be extended and the checks will increase. There'll be an increase to unemployment of $400 a week. In terms of our local communities, state and local government will get additional money. Our schools that absolutely need money so that they can reopen. So this piece of legislation that I hope hits the president's desk within a week, week and a half, will actually be felt by everyone. And it's what we need right now.
Republicans say it's just too big, not targeted. Some of them called it a blue state bailout for a state like California, which actually has a budget surplus right now. What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, there is no such thing as a blue state or a red state bailout. Every state is eligible for the money. And then, I have to say that my Republican colleagues who are reluctant to invest the money that is needed desperately to keep us from falling further behind in terms of our economy had absolutely no problem before the pandemic when the economy was in much better shape, giving away over $1 trillion in tax cuts to the wealthiest people in the country. So
are you suggesting that some Republicans may be more concerned about deficits during Democratic presidencies than during Republican presidencies?
I don't want to suggest that. I want to say that clearly. Okay. Yes, that's the case. History says so.
So let's talk also about another big issue this week, which was the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. It passed this week in the House. This is something you are directly responsible for. Bottom line, what is the most important change in this bill?
Well, I think one of the things that has frustrated people for years is that we keep seeing the same thing over and over again. People being killed unarmed, at the hands of the police. And until police are held accountable, so there's two provisions of the bill: qualified immunity that allows for officers and departments to be sued, and then lowering the standard from which you can prosecute an officer from willful to reckless. So willful means you have to prove that the officer intended to put his knee on George Floyd's neck and kill him, versus what he did was completely reckless and he should have known that it would result in death. And right now, of course, the trial is getting ready to be underway for the officer that killed George Floyd. We have to be able to hold officers accountable.
What do you expect from that trial next week, the Derek Chauvin trial?
I mean, how could there possibly not be a conviction when we all witnessed the execution of George Floyd over 8.5 minutes? So that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping for a conviction. I'm hoping for the maximum amount of charges, because what happened that day impacted the United States all around the world. Everybody saw that around the world.
So let's talk for a moment more about your legislation, though. It passed the House. Now it heads to the Senate. Last year, when Republicans were in control of the Senate, it didn't really go anywhere. Now you've got a Democratic majority Senate, but just barely. What's the status of negotiations right now, and what is that bill potentially going to look like? What kind of changes could we see?
Well, I think, the most controversial aspects of the bill are the two that I mentioned, qualified immunity and Section 242, which lowers the standard of prosecution. We will begin meeting in a bipartisan way on Monday evening. And so what I imagine will happen will be members of the House, both Democrats and Republicans, will go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and hopefully we'll be able to reach some areas of compromise. Our negotiating partners in the Senate is Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina and Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey. And so there is a tremendous amount of goodwill on both sides. And I believe that we're going to be successful. I do.
All right, let's end on something fun, because we like to have fun on this show, Congresswoman. So let's play personal issues. This is the game where we put 30 seconds up on the clock. And since we got a lot of good news when it comes to COVID, it seems like we're starting to come out of our quarantine slowly, correctly, with masks and everything, but the world seems to be going in the right direction. I want to ask some questions about your COVID experience, although I know you've been working the entire time, but some questions about what maybe you've learned during COVID. So here we go. Ready? 30 seconds. Favorite show that you've binge watched during COVID?
Oh gosh, there's so many of them. Lumpin is the latest one. Lupin.
Okay.
On Netflix.
Favorite book you've read?
A book about Africa and the United Nations, actually. A history of the United Nations.
Sounds like a light read. Favorite meal to cook?
Blackened salmon and spinach.
Congresswoman Karen Bass, always a pleasure. Thanks for sharing your views.
Thanks for having me on.
When we come back, folks in Long Beach feeling brand new after getting their vaccines. We head to the LBC to find out why they're distributing vaccines so much faster than everyone else. And speaking of the vaccine, this week, Dolly Parton got a shot of the Moderna vaccine after she donated $1 million to those researching it. She even changed the lyrics to one of her signature songs.
Vaccine, 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 vaccine. 'Cause once you're dead, then that's a bit too late.
You've been doing this. You've been leading demonstrably. All the data bears that out in terms of...
California Governor Gavin Newsom has long called Long Beach's vaccine distribution a model. We were with him this week as he returned once again to the LBC to find out how they're almost done vaccinating college professors when others are barely vaccinating elementary school teachers.
At Cal State Long Beach, Sarah Rodriguez is grateful to now be vaccinated against COVID-19.
It means peace of mind.
Number 2, totally done.
Within the next week, Cal State Long Beach is set to be the first university in all of California where all faculty and staff have had the chance to be vaccinated. Among the takers, Provost Brian Jersky.
We've had very good leadership.
Yeah, no, thank you.
On this day, California Governor Gavin Newsom is visiting Long Beach, which he's called a model for the rest of the state. It's one of several recent gubernatorial visits to a city with its own health department that's blazed its own path.
You were the first to be authoritative.
Long Beach moving faster than the rest of the state to vaccinated healthcare workers, those in nursing homes, those over 65, educators, grocery workers, and more. The governor telling me Long Beach Mayor Robert Garcia deserves much of the credit.
And what do you say to people that live in other areas that say, how are they doing this and why can't they do that where I live?
At the end of the day, you have a leader who not only gets it, but gets things done. And he's willing to take the risk without being reckless to set the terms of a different kind of debate.
They've been operating this now for the last month.
Mayor Garcia showing me around his alma mater, Cal State Long Beach.
There's nothing that anyone cares more about than getting a vaccine.
So what is he doing that others aren't? He says he's trying to run out of vaccine every day, which he says is different than some health departments.
I would much rather stand in front of the community and say, hey everyone, we ran out of vaccine, than sit around and saying, hey everyone, we're holding on to thousands of doses because we're going to plan it out over the next 2 weeks.
Garcia's husband is a teacher, And Garcia himself taught for 10 years before becoming mayor, so his first thought was of teachers.
Immediately, it was an instinct.
He made an early decision to start vaccinating teachers on the first day it was legally allowed, about a month before most of LA County started doing so. Because of that, by the end of this month, Long Beach will become the biggest district in California to reopen for in-person learning, with all of their teachers having had the chance to get their second dose.
I don't think I've ever received as much kind of positive feedback.
Mayor Garcia lost his mother and stepdad to COVID-19 early on and says they've motivated him greatly when it comes to vaccines.
Every single dose is a life-saving opportunity for somebody.
Newly vaccinated residents couldn't be more grateful.
Long Beach is doing an amazing job, and it's just a blessing to be a part of this community, to be able to get this vaccine.
Mayor Garcia has asked Governor Newsom to change the rules to allow Long Beach to vaccinate even more tiers of people because they're so far ahead. Up next, the governor gets the SNL treatment for the very first time, but was it really a good impression?
First, he's hated by every single person in California except those 10 people he had dinner with in Napa that one time. Please welcome Governor Gavin Newsom.
Do you want your legacy to be, yes, I protected the filibuster, or do you want your legacy to be, yes, I protected people and I made life better for Americans?
The Michaelson brothers created Midas Touch as a quarantine hobby and turned it into one of the best known and most influential brands in all of politics and media. The brothers join us next week right here on The Issue Is. Finally, this week, Governor Newsom parodied on SNL, proof he's becoming a national household name, as recall organizers say they're approaching 2 million signatures. We end with a laugh from Alex Moffat's not totally accurate impression on SNL the first time he's been portrayed. Next time, those of us who cover him a lot would like to hear more phrases like quite literally, cohort, and excuse my long-windedness. I'm Alex Michaelson. Thanks for watching The Issue Is, and as always, excuse my long-windedness.
How are things going in California?
Teeth, white. Bodies, tight. COVID, pretty bad.